So we're back with hour 2 of COMP2084. We've got our little template set up. A few people are grabbing it off of GitHub. Now is actually a good time for me to show you how easy it is to push from Visual Studio to GitHub, which is what I did to get my hour 1 code online. So everybody should have a GitHub account by now. If you don't, you need to go to github.com right now and sign up for a free account. Once you're on GitHub, let's create a new repository for today's class. So you just need to click on the plus sign, choose new repository, and type in, I would call it COMP2084-lesson 4 or -week 4. I don't know what I called mine. Lesson 4. So you could use this same name, COMP2084-lesson 4. I'll just put it in as a sample, as a blank one, and then just click the green create button down at the bottom. You don't have to put anything in here. You don't need a README file. Just click create. And now you have a blank repository on GitHub. Then you can either click this copy button right here or go up to the address bar. Let's copy the link to your repository because we need to paste this link into Visual Studio. So our local Visual Studio application will now be connected to this particular repository on GitHub. So how do we get, so we have our solution. There's a little module in here called the Team Explorer, which right now you can't see. In order to see Team Explorer, if you click on the View menu, Team Explorer is right here. About a third of the way down, there's an option that says Team Explorer. So click on that. It should open up. It'll hide Solution Explorer, and it will give you this. Click on View and Team Explorer. It'll open this window. Now, my GitHub login is already saved into my version of Visual Studio. Probably yours is not because you haven't done this yet. So let's first click in here to Settings. And it should say Git. And I think if we choose Global Settings, you should get this. It should have a box for your GitHub username and then a text box for address associated with your GitHub account. Do you see this? What does it back here? I'll just go back to Home and Settings. Do you have Global Settings? No available settings? Okay. So some people see global, who can see global settings when they click on settings? And those of you who don't see global settings, what do you see here under settings? No current available settings? Okay.
I'm not logged into videos.
There's local Git repositories. Maybe they're not using enterprise.
Let's see. Just a minute. Yeah, try this. If you see no settings available, let's look here for a minute. Click File and Account Settings. Do you have any account, or does it say not logged in? You do have an account. So you have a Microsoft account associated with it? Okay. All right. So that's not our issue. Let's just see for a minute. Okay, well, you know what? We'll try to do a push to Git, and it may prompt you to enter your credentials somewhere. We'll see. We'll try it. So if you go to changes, do you get this screen where it's asking you for a commit? No, so click on, again, in Team Explorer, this is, click the little home icon. It should look like this, changes, branches. So if we click changes, you should be able to type a commit message. So try first commit. Now I haven't changed anything, so it won't let me make a commit. And then choose the, I'll just put something in here so I can make a change. So as soon as there's a change, if I choose commit all, if you click commit all, you may get a message that looks something like this. It'll say commit created locally, share your changes on the server. Do you see this message? So click the sync, where my mouse is, it says sync to share changes on your server. So click on that. What happens when you click sync? Does it ask you for your GitHub login? Okay, it asks you where to publish. If it asks you where to publish, then paste in the link to your GitHub repository. Because now it's asking you, what is the GitHub repository? So when I click sync, I get this screen, incoming and outgoing, and I have a push option right here. But I am logged in. So I push from here. And now I have a new commit. We may have to look as to where to find the settings. Let's go back here. Let's try this for your settings. Click on home and settings again. Let's try the repository settings. There is no settings?
Yeah.
Do you have any of these options?
I press the home and settings.
It may be. Although the community version is supposed to be fully featured.
Mine says it won't expire even on. What are we supposed to do?
Doesn't matter. I mean, the community version, it shouldn't expire. Well, the expiry is a separate issue. So, Tyler, you're in Team Explorer? Like it's...
Yeah, I went to Explorer, I go to the press the home button and then changes the settings.
Just pending changes and settings. Okay, so I'm going to have to see whether maybe with community, maybe you can't. I will have to look into that. I mean, we can still push from the, we can still use the command line at the end of class. I'm a bit surprised that you can't do it with community, but I will investigate that. That feature should be here as far as I know. Okay. We'll upload to GitHub then using either the desktop client or the command line later if you can't do it with community. If you are using Enterprise and you see this, then you can just go into Home and Settings and Global Settings, and you should be able to enter your GitHub username and email. And then if you go back to Home and click on Changes, you should be able to do a commit and sync. And somewhere in there, I think, Artem, you said it will ask you for the remote. You'll paste in your URL to your GitHub repository. And when you do a commit and sync, it will upload for you. Were you able to do that successfully? So you're on GitHub? Okay. So it may be that the community doesn't support it. So at the end of class, we'll do a walk. We'll get everybody's on GitHub. If we have to use the command line, that's fine. I actually want to put one other little page in here that I forgot to do. We'll do a simple example. So in my nav bar, you figured it out? There's a GitHub extension. So Brad, did you do it right from within Visual Studio or you went to the Microsoft site? I think, okay. I think actually, let's look. We may be able to do it right from here. If you click on the Tools menu, if you have the Community Edition, you click on Tools. In the middle, there's Extensions and Updates. So if we search here, click on Online and search GitHub. Maybe we'll find one. Aha. So it was, Brad, was it this one? This GitHub extension for Visual Studio. So if you just click on that and download, it will install it. So I guess that comes with the Enterprise version pre-installed. Thanks, Brad. You're a mystery, Artem. Fascinating mystery. Okay, so again, if you want it, the way to do it, once again, so is Tools, Extensions and Updates. And we just searched for GitHub. Not under the installed, I clicked online. So I clicked the online section and then searched GitHub here. There are a number of other tools and extensions that we'll add into Visual Studio later for doing various things that will help make life easier for us. So we're going to download and install this one. So yes, then it will probably prompt you. You may have to restart Visual Studio. Often after you install an extension, it'll ask you to restart it. And then that application, that extension is then active. And yet it may prompt you. So Brad, after you installed it, did it ask you for your Git credentials?
I put it into the team viewer.
In the Team Explorer? Right.
Now I have the create clone inside.
We don't really need to create a clone.
I know, like they're separate options. I can clone a repository.
Right.
Or I can.
Yeah, you basically have with that extension, you have pretty much everything you can do with GitHub, you can do from right inside Visual Studio. You can make branches, you can merge, you can fork, you can do all those things from Visual Studio. So if your GitHub is not integrated right now, don't worry about it, that's fine. Okay, you have the tool to do it. I want to make one other change to our navigation bar here. I want to add one other link. I'll just add in here a simple, one more LI. will link to a page called Hello. I'm going to take out this class equals active on my second link. So I'm just adding line 35 into our nav. So we'll now have 4 links: the default page, the hello page, the tip page, and the list page. And I'll just save those changes so it'll be easy for us to navigate around. So in your site.master page, right under your UL class equals nav, navbar nav, we'll just add that link. So hellos, we'll start with hello. It's going to be a really simple page. So now I want you to add a new page to your project. Call it hello.aspx and link it so that it uses your site.master. So just like we've added the default page, so we have default. I want you to create a page with this name, hello.aspx, and have it use your master page. So go ahead and do that now. So remember, you don't want a regular web form. You want a web form with master page. Hello. So we've created this link, Jacob, on line 35. We now need to build that page. So when we click that link, we don't get a 404. We actually get a hello page that's using our template. So where do we go to add a new page to the project? How do we do it? Rob? Yep, so I'll right click week 4, I'll choose add, and I can either pick new item or it might appear here. So which option do I want? What do I want to add? Yeah, so I want a web form with master page. Yes, just leave them there. So let's call this hello. And again, picking our template's easy because we only have one template. So up here, we can set the page title as so our master page is going to use this. It'll render that as the title of the page in the browser. So let's put on an H1 that says hello. So there's no C# code, there's nothing fancy, it's just a basic page with a template and a simple HTML tag. Let's go to our browser, just try to load this page right now. So if I go back to my home page by clicking on our little link at the top. So now we've got our 3 links. So when I click on hello, now I got this. Right. So we notice this is not a 404 error. It didn't say it couldn't find hello. It finds it. But the error we got is could not load type. So it's saying it's looking for a class called hello in our C# code. Whenever we add a new page, we've got to rebuild our solution to get that class added into our code DLL file. So if we click on build and build our solution, it updates our DLL, so we can see it's time-stamped right now, 9/27. And now we should be able to load hello. So anytime we add something new to the project, we'll need to recompile our code. Okay. So now we're going to try a really simple example of working with a few of the ASP server controls. Let's create, basically here's what we want. We're going to put a text box and a button on. When the user types something in the text box and clicks the button, we want a message to print on the page that displays, includes whatever they typed in the text box. So for a place to output the message, we're going to use a server tag. We're going to use an ASP label tag. We'll give it an ID. And normally in ASP.NET, it's not a rule, but it's a programmer's convention. We use a little prefix to indicate what kind of control this is. So if it's a label, this usual prefix you'll see in ASP.NET code will be LBL. So I'll give this an ID of LBL message. I could just give it an ID of message, but LBL is a bit more descriptive. So when I'm accessing this element in code, I know that it's a label. It's not a button or a we want to use C# code to change the text on this label. And later on, we can use Bootstrap. Actually, we can give it a class as well. So let's say, because this is an ASP control, it's not an HTML label. Instead of using the attribute class, we use the attribute CSS class. Does the same thing. So we'll use alert info.
How do you stop the server when it's running?
Oh, so you clicked this?
Yeah.
So when you click, if you start, yeah, so right, it's a pain. I can't change my code. If I started it, there'll be a little red stop. There'll be a pause and stop button when you do this here.
Oh, there.
So you can pause it or stop it. If you just use the start without the debugging, you don't have to keep doing that.
Okay.
So I recommend launching it with start without debugging. We'll only use the debugger when we really need to. We'll actually use it in a bit. Label. Let's put in an ASP text box. Give it an ID of txt name. So whenever we use text boxes, I'll use that little txt prefix. Again, it's optional. We need the run@server attribute. And we can put in a placeholder. It doesn't really matter whether you use a separate closing tag with these controls or you make them self-closing. Both will work. And lastly, we want an ASP button on here. Give it a little prefix of btn, submit. Also a server control, so we'll use that run@server. The button will say submit. And again, we can use Bootstrap to style it. We'll make it green. So at runtime, when we look at this page, we won't see those ASP tags. We'll see a standard HTML label, a standard HTML input, and a standard HTML button tag. These will all get converted by ASP.NET compiler at runtime. So we can save those changes if you load up, refresh your hello page in the browser. You should see the text box, the button, and we might see a little bit of the label. And I've stopped my server, so I just have to start it up again. ASAT, we came back to your question. This was the error I was trying to generate earlier. It says you can't use that control inside of a form unless the form has the run at equals server attribute. So we can't use any of these controls. Having the run at in the body isn't going to work. So in order to fix this, I'll go back to my site.master. And I had moved this run at equals server out of my form tag. I need to put it back there. UID back, yeah. So whenever you create a page or a master page, Visual Studio will automatically generate that form tag. Just leave it there. Those controls will depend on having that form with run at equals server. So we don't have to build it. Visual Studio will always give it to us automatically. Which means we pretty much never have to put our own form tags on. We just use that one. And we can only have one per page. We can't have multiple server-side forms on the same page, just one. So now my error should go away. So here's our label with nothing on it, our placeholder. So notice when I click the button, it does act as a submit button. You can see that the page actually reloads. Right? You can see it flash here, but obviously nothing's happening yet. So what we want is when the user clicks the button, we want this label to say hello, and also then append on whatever the name is in the box. And maybe actually we should just, because I'm sure it's bothering the designers in the room, let's at least put this label inside its own div so it appears above rather than beside the box. So at least my label is going to appear above. So what will we do here? What will we need to do in order to make this functionality work? When the user clicks the button, we want the label to say hello and grab the name from the name text box. I'll give you a hint. We're not really going to do much here, right? We need to write server-side codes. Things have to happen on the server in C#. Right, so we're going to want to write code here. I clicked on View and Code, and now we get the C# sibling of this HTML page. So we want to trigger something when the user clicks the button. So we did this a couple weeks ago. Does anybody remember? We could just write the function ourselves Or we could let Visual Studio write the function for us of what should happen when the user clicks the button. I say it's easier to let Visual Studio do the work. How do we trigger getting the C# function in here? I actually did at the end of class a couple weeks ago. We could add the method, but Visual Studio gives us a shortcut. The shortcut, if we click down here where it says design, we can actually see the visual representation of the page with the master page. If we want to write code when the user clicks this button, I can just double click it. And Visual Studio generates that function for us. If we could type it all out ourselves, we'll just let Visual Studio do it easier and faster. So this code will run whenever somebody clicks on that button. So down here at the bottom left, it says design, split, and source. Right down here at the bottom left, you don't have these? I wonder if it's in your view menu somewhere. Yeah, try view and designer. Yeah, Brad, you may have that. See, there's three options in view. There's code, that's your C#. There's designer, that's your what you see is what you get, visual editor. And then the markup is the HTML. So we're in basically the markup view. So you could do it if you click view and designer, you'd get the same thing. So double click your button. And if there's no click method, it writes the click method for you. So now we need to write a little bit of C# code. So we need to refer to our label. And this is where using that little LBL prefix was handy, right? Our label has an ID of LBL message. So if I type LB, Visual Studio brings up any objects or any classes that start with LB, where there's only one of them. So this is where those little prefixes are useful in our code. And now I can either select this with my mouse, I can hit enter, or I can just hit the dot. We talked about dot notation last week. So LBL message, it's an object, right? It's a label object on our page. So I'll just hit the dot. And we talked last week about objects having properties and methods. We want to access one property of our label object. So which property, and the properties are denoted by this little black. Which property of the label do we want to access? Yeah, it has a text property. So I can choose it. So the text on my label should say, hello, and then a space. And then how do we add on to the end of that message whatever name was typed in our text box? Yeah, we'll do a concatenate. So we'll use a plus sign. And now if we don't remember what we called that text box, I do remember we use that little txt prefix. Okay? So if I start typing tx, well, there's the name of my text box object, txt name. And I'll hit the dot. Which property of our text box do we want to put onto the end of our message? Yeah, the text property. So whatever the user typed in that text box. And I need one more thing. I've got a little red line. What's that telling me? Yeah. And again, if I put my mouse over it, Visual Studio actually tells me why I've got a red line. Semicolon expected. So we're going to go to our text box. The text property will tell us what was entered in that box. And remember, our text box is sticky. So even though our page is being reloaded, we are not losing whatever was in that text box. The value will stay there. So we're taking that value, we're creating a string that says hello in front, and we're setting the text property of our label equal to that message. Now we've changed the C# code, so we need to build, right? We've put new C# code. That code won't be active until we recompile our project. So I'll build my solution. And I'll reload my hello page. Our form is sticky. We don't have to go to another page to process our form inputs. Like maybe this is a registration page. In PHP, we would build a registration form, and then we would build a save page. And the first page would post to the second page. And we'd have to use $post to get all the values. With ASP.NET, we can do everything all on one page. We don't have that messy $_post array to work with anymore. Now, I want to make one other small change to this page. It looks kind of dumb to have this label showing up here when my page first loads, right? There's no output there. So how could we make it so that when the page loads the first time, we don't see this blue section? And we only see that after the user clicks the submit button. Okay, so we could actually create the label tag when that's clicked. Yeah, we could do that. That's one option. Yeah, that might even be easier. By default, we can set the visibility of our label to false. And when the user clicks the button, not only do we change the text, we can also change the visible property in C#. So this will become visible after the user clicks our button. Let's try it that way, and then we'll try one other thing. So here, right in our HTML, we'll default this. So when you first load the page, you don't see that label. The only thing you see are the text box and the button. So if I just go back and click hello again, that blue section should go away. It's still there. We can access it in our C# code, but the user, it's not rendered to the browser. So now where should we, in here, we want to change it and make it visible. There's a couple places we could do it. What line would it make sense to add code to now turn that back on?
Either 18 or 20 before or after the text.
Right, when we're putting a message on there, so we'll show the label, print the message to the label. So what would we do to make that LBL message object visible?
Label message does the equals true.
So we'll refer to the object, but we'll set the visible property. True. So first make it visible and then print the message on it. We'll take breaks soon, don't worry. So again, we've changed our C# code. So we have to build our solution one more time. Notice our DLL is probably getting a little bit, well, it might be getting a little bigger, not yet. Still only 5 kilobytes. So now we click hello. We don't see that label. But once we click the button, we make it visible and we set the message to true. So if we come back to thinking about last week, we were talking about objects, properties, and methods. This is the style that we're coding in. We're using the click method of our button object, and we're using our label and text box objects with a couple of the properties. The visible property of our label, we're changing. We're accessing the text property of our text box object, and we're accessing the text property of our label object. So all of our code in ASP.NET, it takes this kind of structure, which is why we had to spend 3 hours last week talking about what objects, properties, and methods really are. We could do other things with this too. For example, if we want to change the class. So that would be another way of toggling the visibility, right? We could have an invisible class in our CSS, and we could assign that class to our label. And when the user clicks the button, rather than changing the visibility, we could change the CSS class to something in Bootstrap. Or maybe we have conditions, we want to use a green, maybe the label's green, using the alert success, or maybe the label's red, using the alert danger. We can dynamically, programmatically modify those classes in C# to change how it looks if we want. So everything we do, it all takes this form of some method will then access, call other methods, or change properties on different objects. Okay. Any questions about our code so far?
Could you show me ASP code?
Sure.
The question about CSS class.
Yes.
What's the difference between CSS class and just class?
Okay, great question. So why did we use CSS class here, and how is it different from adding just the word class as an attribute?
So Bootstrap is the CSS class. That's the first style.
Yeah.
I guess CSS class is interpreted by the server when it creates the page from the ASP.
You're right. We hear our time. Here's the clue. You're on the right track. When we view the source and go find our form objects, so here's our label. When we put our code in Visual Studio, it says CSS class. Look at how it gets interpreted by the compiler. Thing here, right? Our submit button. So just like the tags itself, right? This doesn't say ASP button. It says input type equals submit. The .NET compiler converts it to regular HTML. We had an ASP label, and it converts it to a span tag. So when we're using a server control, an ASP control, we use the attribute CSS class. It's the same, basically the same as the class for an HTML object. It gets converted to regular HTML at runtime.
And so we can't use just class.
No, not if it's a server, if it's an ASP control. When you're accessing, when you want to style an ASP control, you need to use the attribute CSS class. If it's a regular HTML attribute, then you just use a regular class. At runtime, it's all converted to the same thing. Okay. That's a very good question. So, and same, if we wanted to access it, because these are server controls, we wanted to access it in C#, like if I wanted to change the class, we'll see if I hit .class, it doesn't come up, right? Class is not an attribute. It's not a property of an ASP label. Only CSS class, that's the valid property. And again, this is where our little code hints help us. If we're not sure the name and we type it, we'll see which properties we can use. If it's not in that list, if I just say class equals alert, right, it gives me, Artem, it gives me an error. It says class is not a property of this ASP object. You have to use that error goes away now. Okay. Good time for us to take a break. We'll take 10 minutes here. We'll come back and we'll build 2 more pages before we go today.